Welcome back to another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Today I'm speaking with Derek. He was diagnosed as a type 2 originally, then he was re-diagnosed as a type 1, but then again re-diagnosed for a third time as a type 2. But then he went into DKA after ACL surgery, and they think he might be a type 1. You're going to find out when you listen. It's a lot. Please don't forget that nothing you hear on the Juicebox Podcast should be considered advice, medical or otherwise. Always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan or becoming bold with insulin. Hey, if you're enjoying the podcast, there's a couple of things you can do that would really help. Subscribe or follow in an audio app like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or something like that. You can follow the private Facebook group. You can follow the public Facebook page. You can follow on Instagram, on TikTok, on social media in general. You can tell someone else about the podcast. That would be huge. But mostly subscribing and following, that's the way to help. Also, if you need something that we have in an ad, like an Omnipod or, AG1, a Cozy Earth sheet, doesn't matter to me. If any of that stuff seems attractive to you, using my links or my offer codes really does help support the show. Thanks so much. I'm going to get you to the show now. Today's episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, a company that's bringing together caregivers and parents of children with type 1. Later in this episode, I'll be speaking with Sarah, mom of Jackson, who's an active 10-year-old boy with type 1. Sarah is married with 2 children and a recruiter at a law firm. Thanks to Medtronic, Sarah and her family found the support of the Medtronic caregiver community valuable in their journey. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info.
My name is Derek. I have been a diabetic since August of 2009. I have spent the majority of my life in my career in the banking industry, and I have a wife and 2 boys. I love being a diabetic in the sense that it's a mystery that I always have to figure out, but at the same time, it is somewhat of an emotional weight that I've also had to deal with. And I guess I like to talk to others about being a diabetic as well.
Well, then you're in the right place. So 15 years ago, you were diagnosed, but how old were you then?
I would have been 29.
29, 39. Mm-hmm. Okay, so you're in your mid-40s now.
Right.
Okay. Any type 1 in your extended family?
Not at the time that I was diagnosed. My mother, I want to say about a year after I was diagnosed, she was diagnosed with type 2. And then after no medicine worked, I believe, she was re-diagnosed as a type 1.
Bandwagon jumper. Okay. Mm-hmm. How old was she when that happened?
She would have been around the age of 70.
No kidding.
68, 70 years old. Yep.
How long ago was this?
This would have been 2018, I believe.
She with us still?
She is, yes. Fortunately, she has a crazy story about how she discovered on accident through a completely different issue that she had several aneurysms that affected her heart, in and around her heart, and she had to have emergency surgery to get rid of a couple of aneurysms that the doctors still to this day don't know how she made it, because she was just that close.
They were so bad. Did they tell her were those aneurysms from diabetes, or did they not say?
They said it was autoimmune.
The aneurysms were?
Yeah,
Really?
It was an offshoot from something else that was autoimmune going on with her. So, yeah.
I'm asking the internet. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
An autoimmune aneurysm occurs when the immune system mistakenly attacks the blood vessel walls. No kidding.
Yeah.
Leading to inflammation and weakening the vessels.
Yep.
Vasculitis.
Yeah, that's what it
That's
is.
what they called it, huh? Symptoms of an aneurysm caused by an autoimmune inflammation can vary depending on its location. Common symptoms include localized pain, fatigue, and sometimes visible pulsations in large arteries. Oh my gosh.
Hmm.
An aneurysm
Yep.
ruptures. Yeah, we know how that goes. Wow.
Yep.
No
Yeah. And
kidding.
the doctors pretty much said like all she had to do was just like cough the wrong way and the aneurysm could have completely, exploded. The aneurysm was big enough to the point where it completely filled her chest cavity before they did surgery.
So pain is how she figured it out?
Yep. A little bit of pain. However, she went into the hospital for something completely different. They took, I think, x-rays, and the doctor comes back and says, "Hey, did you know that you have an aneurysm at, close to your heart?" And at the very, very top of the x-ray, there was like this little like aneurysm, bottom of an aneurysm that showed. And that led to follow-up appointments with a heart doctor. They did more tests and they were like, "Oh boy, you need to like go to the hospital like right now."
Hmm.
So
Are you saying that the x-ray tech caught it by mistake? Just a little piece of it?
yeah.
Wow.
Yep.
Well, that's some good
Yep.
luck.
Yep.
Well, I have to tell you, Derek, I think I say this more than I expect to, but you've come on here and said something I've never heard before. And I think you're going to say something later that I've never heard before as well. So this is interesting.
Okay.
So your diagnosis happens how? What are your signs? What gets you to the hospital, et cetera?
In the summer of 2009, I started drinking a lot of water, like excessively. And then I started getting cloudy vision. And from there, it just kept on getting worse and worse and worse. And then the extreme tiredness all the time. I would go to work, come home, eat dinner, go on the couch, sleep all night long, get up, go back to work. That process happened for probably 2 to 3 weeks, at least on end. And then I went to the doctor and I said, "Listen, this is what's happening. I want some blood tests." And said, "Fine." Then several weeks later, after I called my doctor and said, "Hey, where are these? What's going on?" And the nurse said to me, "Listen, we'll have the doctor call you back. We found something." Like, okay.
Great.
So, yeah, the day before I had an appointment with my doctor, I was in a music studio to record a project with a singing group out of my church. I come out from about a 6 or 7 hour session. I find out that my mother is in the hospital with something that almost killed her. I think it was an infection that was close to her brain. So they basically just caught that in time. Came home that following morning. I went out to my car, found out that my car had gotten broken into, and I had unfortunately left my wallet in the car, and someone took my wallet, tried to charge about $10,000 worth of stuff on it, got away with a lot of it. And then I went to my doctor and I'm telling him everything that happened to me that day. He's like, "Well, I hate to make your day worse, but you're a type 2 diabetic."
Jesus Christ.
And
That's horrible. Derek, I don't even know what to do other than laugh. That's horrible.
No, I look back on it now and it's, it's like, how do you explain? I don't want to turn into one of those people that just like tells all of your problems to somebody else and they go, "Okay." And like they never want to deal with you again. But it's almost comical, some of the things that like my family has been through health wise.
No kidding.
And so from that point on, like I didn't anything that my doctor said after that. And I asked him like 3 times, "Are you sure I'm a diabetic?" And he said, "Yeah." My fasting blood sugar was 303. And I have a sneaking suspicion that I probably had some form of diabetes, probably back from my college days when I was in college, because I just remember going to like the weight room in college, going around campus, and just after, physical exertion, just becoming really, 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 really tired. And after eating certain things, just becoming really, really tired to the point where I was like, I I had to lay down.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the diagnosis story.
Wow. Jeez. Getting older means a world of change, but some things still stay the same, like being at risk for type 1 diabetes. Because type 1 can happen at any age, so screen it like you mean it. If just one person in your family has type 1, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too. And 50% of type 1 diagnoses happen after the age of 18, so screen it like you mean it. Type 1 diabetes starts long before you need insulin, and one blood test could help you spot it early and lower the risk of serious complications like diabetic ketoacidosis, known as DKA. So don't get caught by surprise. Screen it like you mean it. Because getting answers now can help you get prepared. The more you know, the more you can do. So don't wait. Talk to a doctor about how to get screened. Tap now or visit screenfortype1.com to learn more. Again, that's screenfortype1.com and screen it like you mean it. This episode is sponsored by Medtronic Diabetes, and this is Sarah.
Sports are his life. He was 9 years old. He was just starting to develop his own personality and his own passions and his own independence. And instantly we were afraid that that was going to be taken away. It was a very scary time for me. I would say probably the first couple weekends, there was a lot of fear about what happens if I go low. Obviously, now that we're on the Medtronic technology, what we do managing his diabetes during athletics has changed drastically. The Medtronic technology that we are using has almost eliminated the fear I have while my child is playing.
As far as community goes, have you met other people with diabetes? What's some good advice you've gotten from them?
I have met so many people with diabetes. This summer, I had the opportunity to meet others that are using Medtronic technology. And I feel like we have built such a strong connection because we speak the same language. We don't even have to say what we're going through. I have good friends that are Medtronic mamas that I can reach out to that have been incredibly helpful. And then our Medtronic rep has been phenomenal.
To learn more about the Medtronic Champions community and to find helpful resources and tips for caregivers and families, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/parents-caregivers. How do you begin to manage 15 years ago? It's right on the cusp of, like, did they talk to you about a pump? Was it MDI at first?
They gave me a meter and gave me metformin and said, let's see how you are in a month.
Because they thought you were type 2.
Yes.
Okay.
Right. And I went through like the beginning stages of metformin, how it's wonderful on your GI tract. And it lowered my blood sugar a lot, to the point where I was mostly in the upper 100s at that time. I went to diabetes education classes about a month and a half after I got diagnosed, I think. Honest to goodness, Scott, like the one thing that I took away from that whole thing more than like carb counting and like everything else that they tell you there is like, if you don't treat this thing the right way, you're going to lose limbs. And so for, the next year to year and a half, I'm almost like starving myself because I'm not like, I don't want to lose limbs. You know what I mean? So it was more out of like fear than anything else, because it's pretty shocking when they tell you that.
Yeah, sure.
I continued for the next couple of years where I was on an increasing dosage of metformin, switched doctors because I wanted to go on something else, and my doctor retired. So this new doctor gave me Januvia. I pretty much, like, it had no effect on my blood sugar. I was in the low 200s all the time. And then I was able to go to another doctor's office that was in the basement of my workplace.
Okay.
And there was like a team of doctors that worked there. And they were like, listen, we got to get a hold of this thing because my A1C was anywhere from probably 6 at good times to maybe like 8 or 9 in those years.
Mm-hmm.
So then I go to this new office that's just in my workplace, and they gave me Farxiga. It worked at first, but I just, again, I could never, I had some side effects from that where I felt like I was dehydrated a lot. It never, unfortunately, it didn't bring my blood sugar down to where it should have been, well, what it is right now. Tell me if I'm going too fast or not, or if you have.
So if you think you had issues all the way back to maybe college even, and they're like treating you like a type 2 for years, right? And so we can surmise from this, you're in the middle of a 10-year long process of like LADA. It's just a very like type 1.5 slow onset of type 1 diabetes. Is that what you think looking back?
I think so, but that's another story we can develop later on in this conversation.
Okay. So they're giving you other drugs that are helping a little, but then not for long, it seems like.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Scott, when I look back at it, I think this is an important point to make with all of this is every doctor that I saw was a GP.
So they never said, go see an endocrinologist.
No. I think I had a doctor along the way that said, we're going to have to put you on insulin. And it was kind of said with like a frustration, like, I can't believe you're not compliant.
Yeah.
You're not doing the things that I'm asking you to do. And he was the guy who said, listen, if you gotta start eating right. And I was, for the most part, I was. And, he's, at appointments, he's saying, hey, listen, if you go to a Christmas party, for example, instead of eating 6 cookies, just eat 3.
Were you eating any cookies?
No. I'm more of like a bread eater than like pies and cookies and cakes and sweet things.
So when they say that to you, do you speak up and say, I don't eat the way you're saying?
Yeah.
And do you get a response?
Most of the time I get just like this blank stare, like, well, obviously you're not doing what we're telling you to do.
Okay.
Between the team of doctors that I saw when I started on Farxiga and the previous doctor with Januvia, and then my first doctor that prescribed metformin, I wonder why no one said, hey, let's try insulin, or let's go to an endocrinologist.
Well, I mean, you can see, but I don't know why they don't say go to an endocrinologist, but when they think they're telling you the right thing, you're ignoring them. That's why your A1C is higher. Right. So, if you're not going to eat right, then we're going to have to give you insulin to bring down your blood sugar because you can't stop with the cupcakes, Derek. And so that's the progression that they go through. Not, I wonder if I'm misdiagnosing this or if maybe I'm not the right person to be involved in this.
Right.
Yeah. That's a shame. It happens. Derek, it happens to so many people.
Yeah. My wife and I often have a conversation about this based on what has happened in the last couple of years that I guess we'll get to. But I feel like, when people say that there's nothing wrong with our healthcare system or we've got the best healthcare system in the world, like go to another country. And that to me, like comes from someone who has no health problems, usually does not
They've
have
never had to have one of these conversations. They're like, everything works great for me.
Honestly, along the way, for me, I'm a very, very optimistic person. Anyone who hangs around me will tell you that. And I'm almost at the point previous to the doctors that I have right now. I just felt like the harder thing to do was to fight doctors and the healthcare system rather than diabetes itself.
Tell me why though. Like beyond this last story, what else do you find yourself fighting with them about?
You ask for blood pressure medicine to be filled 3 times and you go without it for 2 weeks because no one can figure out how to put the order through. I have friends who have requested refills for certain things and we're going on like a month and a half and they just have to pay for things out of pocket. here's a good advertisement for the podcast. Like, I'm going to talk about DKA. I did not know that was even a thing before it happened to me. And I learned about it mostly through the Juicebox podcast. No doctor had ever sat down with me and ever explained, hey, listen, if you see these symptoms, you need to get to a hospital like right away. Until I had, maybe like the fourth or fifth doctor, they never really went into what you should stay away from or what you should eat. Not that I'm expecting like a whole menu to take home or whatever, but there was never a basic conversation with a lot of these doctors about what to do.
So they just told you count carbs, put in the insulin. That's it.
Yep.
Right.
That's it.
No idea that like this food might be more difficult on your blood sugar than this food, or, you might need a different bolusing strategy if there's, this paired with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. No one ever explained pre-bolusing. I discovered pre-bolusing through your podcast.
Listen, Derek, I'm going to tell you something. I'm aware of this. Okay. This isn't lost on me, but it is such a basic idea. I take that you learned it from here, and I think that's great. And I think you're not the only one. I think there's tens of thousands of people who have learned it from the podcast, which is great. Yeah. But it's not like I'm not over here talking on some high level, like the credit I get is just not commensurate with the information that's shared. You know what I mean? Like, I'm just like, look, one day I noticed that if I, put my daughter's insulin in a little sooner, it seemed to work a little better. And then I, worked through the steps of that. And here's a way I've figured out how to describe it to you.
Yeah.
And I'll take all the credit that's due on that. But at the same time, your point, I think, is how is that even necessary? Like, how is it possible that I'm getting this many kudos over saying, hey, you should time your insulin well?
Yeah.
That's it. It's all I'm saying,
Yeah. To go back to your point about stop eating cupcakes, Derek, like one of my doctors was like, hey, we got to get you into a diabetic nutrition class. And I told the doctor, I said, listen, I've already been through 2 of those before. Mm-hmm. My experience, I don't know about other places, but I've been to nutritionists at 2 different practices, and both of them did not make any distinction between good carbs, bad carbs, what affects your blood sugar more than this and that, just carbs, and here's a recipe, and that's it.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to this one doctor, I said, okay, I have to see how much it's going to cost. And I called my insurance company at the time, and they're like, we're not going to cover it.
To see the nutritionist.
Yep.
Yeah, see, what you're caught in is hey, this person's A1C has been over this for so long. It tells me now to recommend to send them to a nutritionist. You should see a nutritionist. And then the nutritionist goes and does what they do, and by the way, they're great doctors. They're great nutritionists, but if you don't bump into them, then this is the process you go through. Then the nutritionist says some half-ass stuff to you. They're like, here, try this recipe. And you're like, okay, great. Meanwhile, you're walking around in the back of your head. You're like, I eat way too many cookies. But I would imagine at some point you thought, I did have a cookie once. Like, is that too many? Am I doing, like, you know what I mean? Like, it just, Derek, you know what you're describing, right?
Yep.
You're describing the fragility of people and their inability to do the things that they've been tasked to do.
Yep. Like my mother, just not to belabor this, but my mother has been to a nutritionist. She's a nutritionist on a regular basis because she feels more comfortable with this person at the office where she sees her endocrinologist. Mm-hmm. This person told her, you can eat whatever you want as long as you cover it with insulin.
Right.
Okay. For some people, certain things may not bother you, but I can't ever imagine telling someone, hey, eat whatever you want as long as your insulin covers it. Like,
so you know what that is though, Derek? Like they're platitudes, right? They're like, they're surface level statements, and it's not for a bad reason. Like I can make an argument to tell somebody that, right? Like, because what they really mean is that diabetes is, in your situation, a lot about making sure that you have enough insulin to cover the carbs that you're eating. And they don't want to make people feel restricted. And I understand that even because, I think probably what they've learned is that these people have just been knocked over with a new diagnosis. It's already bad. And if you make them feel restricted, they might run in the wrong direction and just not do anything.
Yeah.
So let's drive home insulin covers carbs, which, by the way, I think that is the core of how you manage a good A1C, right? Like,
sure.
There's more to say after that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you shouldn't eat really terrible food.
Yeah, right.
But I've learned making this podcast, and I think probably the doctors have learned, and everyone else, when you start telling people how to eat, you get involved in a very contentious argument.
Yeah.
And so maybe it's just like, I can't get them to do everything exactly right or exactly perfect for their health. So let me just make sure that because I have to tell you, like, that's kind of where I come from, which is like, I can't tell you how to eat, meaning you're not going to listen to me even if I did. And so let's at least make sure that your blood sugars are stable and in range by using the amount of insulin that is required by the food that you're eating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I kind of come from a family where we speak plainly and truthfully, even if it hurts. I definitely get that. You don't want to upset people that much. You have to talk the truth, right?
Yeah.
In some way.
Well, may I say this, and I don't disagree with you at all, but if we're caught in a situation where we can't get a doctor to say the right thing or a nurse to put in the right, blood test or medication order, we also have to, I think, recognize that as patients, we're also people with our own frailties and shortcomings.
True.
And I mean, that's where this problem is. Like, my wife works in a job where she's told me that some of the biggest problems they have with drugs is that eventually people take them, feel better, and then say, oh, I don't need these anymore. They don't say, oh, I only feel better because I'm taking the drug. Yeah. So they'll get their blood pressure down, but not change anything else about their life and say, oh, my blood pressure is good, and stop taking their blood pressure medication.
Yeah.
And people do that you see people with type 2 will do it. Type 1s can't because they'll die. But, you'll see type 2s go, oh, my A1C was great last month. So the next one we give away, and then we'll bring it back down again. Like, it's thought of like, for some people, it can be thought of like that. Medications, that's one of the problems. Like, I don't know if antidepressant medication, like, there's arguments about whether it's necessary for everybody that's being given to or not, but you'll see a lot of people be depressed, take the medication, say, oh, I don't feel depressed anymore. And then the first thing they do is stop taking the medication.
Yeah.
Which might be the only reason why they're not depressed anymore. Like, I don't know. Like, but that's the world the doctors are trapped in.
Yeah.
You're trapped in a world where doctors don't seem to know what they don't know, and will, if everything's not going exactly the way they think it's supposed to go, are very willing to blame you for something.
Yeah.
And you're and they're trapped in a world where people don't listen to anything they say anyway. So they just assume nobody's doing anything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
It's a vicious, shitty circle is what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. I truly believe that the majority of nurses and doctors that I have dealt with over the years are great people. Like, they're doing God's work. However, when you run into someone in the medical field who doesn't care or just refuses to help, it kind of like makes you jaded a little bit about,
I mean, it has me. I'm with you. I'll go further and say, I don't think anyone's trying to do a bad job, whether it's the person coming for the help or the person that's there to give it. Again, I just think this is what happens. Like, I think people get tired. Things get repetitive. Their resources, their own mental resources are limited. The amount of time they have or money or energy is limited. That goes for the doctor and the person looking for the help. And everyone just sort of says the first thing that pops into their head. And then, the doctor says something and then you go home and forget it. Or you go home and try it and it doesn't work. And now you think he's an idiot. I'm telling you, man, the model's bad. And it's not the healthcare model that's bad. It's the communication model that's bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
I put up an episode just the other day where this 19-year-old girl comes on. She's got all these different problems. And her life is spinning out of control health-wise. She's only in college, And so I said, listen, let's just take the hour, go through all your problems, see if we can't figure out at least what's happening to you, and then maybe put together an idea of what to take back to a doctor. And we did that. Now I'm waiting to hear back from her. But, as we're doing this, she's she's been degrading for years and no one's helping her. They just keep piling medications on her that are causing different issues. And then it just keeps happening like that. Like nobody attacked the central problem, and she doesn't know how to attack it because she's 19. And I think that's happening to almost everybody in these health situations.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
That's all.
For
it
sure.
Just sucks.
It's
all
sad
around.
to see. It's really, really sad to see.
Yeah.
Especially when the problem in a lot of cases is just so simple. Just, treating the root of the problem rather than just, hey, let's throw more medicine at it.
Yeah. No, that's definitely going to be what happens, is because someone's going to say, using this girl as an example, somebody put on a proton pump inhibitor for stomach acid. And then that probably caused a B12 deficiency. And she might have also been anemic because of that. Then they go, oh, you're anemic, take an iron supplement, which does not combat anemia very well.
Right.
And then she's anemic, and then she starts to feel like depression. And then they put her on an antidepressant medication. I'm like, can't she get her iron up and see if she feels better? So now they've got her on a proton pump inhibitor. She's taking iron supplements, B12 injections, antidepressants, like blah, 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 blah. And I'm like, I don't know, like maybe you could have just tried to change her diet and see if you could have impacted the stomach acid without the proton pump inhibitor.
Yep.
Like it's just fascinating. You know what I mean? So
yeah. Oh, for sure.
But then I'll take the other side of it. The doctor could have put her on a diet and she might have been like, I'm a kid, I'm not doing that. Like, who knows? You know what I mean? Like, dude, I don't know.
Well, you don't know what you don't know if you don't try it, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to steal my thunder for the future of this conversation, but like lately I have been trying to eat as natural as possible while still going low carb.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm telling you, my numbers are outstanding, like better than they've ever been since I was originally diagnosed.
Oh, of course. Yeah. I mean, the less you tax yourself with carbs, and it's going to be less insulin that you need to use, right? So you're going to see fewer spikes at meals. You're going to see fewer lows from insulin. Like it settles everything pretty well for a lot of people. So, tell me about that. So when did you make the switch?
Let me continue with my personal story because it'll make more sense.
Go ahead.
I was on Farxiga for a couple of years. Kind of had A1Cs between like 6.5 and 8. Never really got down where my doctors were comfortable with. In 2020, I was having some issues with my right knee. I had injured it when I was in high school, all these years, with knee problems. And I finally said to my doctor, like, I need to go fix this. And he said, let's go get, some tests done. And nurse called me back and said, we tested to take a look at, your ACL. We figured out that you have been living without an ACL for 20 years. And also I had some meniscus tears. Had that surgery done in February of 2020. Stopped Farxiga, continued taking Farxiga, I think like 2 or 3 days after surgery. As a result of that, the doctors think that stopping it and restarting it threw me into DKA.
Stopping and starting the Farxiga?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
What else happened around that time, though? Like, what other things can precede an onset of type 1? Like illnesses, trauma, anything like that?
No, nothing. And my blood sugar, like about a week before surgery, was hanging around the mid 100s. So I can't say, I was, out of control necessarily. They think that there was some small side effect with Farxiga where if you stop it and then start it again, it puts you into DKA. When that happens, it's usually very, very, very fatal. So my wife rushes me to the hospital. Within 45 minutes, I went from like just casually throwing up to completely blue and almost dead. Fortunately, I went to a hospital that had, great doctors and nurses. It got better again over the next couple of days. Saw an endocrinologist for the first time in the hospital. And she said, listen, I've been looking at your numbers and your history. And it's apparent to me that you're type 1 diabetic.
Mm.
And so in the hospital, I started insulin. I got a quick, 5-minute, primer on what insulin is and what to do and how much to take with a sliding scale, all that stuff, and went home after a week and a half of dealing with DKA.
Can I read you something very quickly? Farxiga is not approved for use in type 1s due to the increased risk of DKA in the population for people with type 1 diabetes. The use of SGLT2 LT2 inhibitors like Farxiga should be done with extreme caution and only under close medical supervision. So yeah, you were on the wrong medication.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. After that, after I started using insulin, it was the solution that I had been looking for, for 11 years or so. Numbers were awesome. I think my A1C went from in the middle 7s to 5.8 or 5.9. I finally found the solution where I could eat what I wanted a little bit more than I had been eating before. My blood sugar was thanking me for being on insulin.
Yeah,
it was a relief. And then right after that, right after I came home from the hospital is when COVID started.
Mm-hmm.
I did not have an in-office appointment to see my endocrinologist over the course of the next 2 years. They just said, hey, listen, just have Zoom meetings and that's good enough for us. While I was in the hospital, they did encourage me to see an eye doctor because they had noticed some inflammation in both eyes.
Mm.
I went to an eye doctor and they saw the inflammation and said, hey, let's just keep an eye on this, but you're good to go. Went home. In the following weeks, I had a virtual appointment with my endocrinologist. And I said, listen, I love insulin, but I'm gaining a massive amount of weight. I weighed about 200 pounds. And in a matter of mere months, I was at 215. I needed help. So he was like, okay, well, why don't we try Ozempic? So I went on Ozempic for about 6 weeks. And after week number 6, I started having a lot of blood vessels breaking in my eye. Went back to the eye doctor. They said that you have retinopathy, diabetic retinopathy. So ever since maybe I want to say end of 2020, beginning of 2021, I've had treatments for retinopathy as well.
Is that the lasers or how do they handle that?
Needles in the eye. Yeah.
Which oddly don't hurt, right?
Honestly, a lot of people say that it hurts. It's more of the doctor trying to keep your eye open while he's
the bigger
putting
problem.
the needle in the eye.
That's the larger issue.
Yeah. Yeah. It's straight out of a science fiction horror movie. But one of those appointments when I was at the eye doctor, there was a massive jump in inflammation. He said, have you checked your blood pressure recently? And I said, no, not really. I just kind of keep track of my blood sugar. He took my blood pressure and didn't tell me what it was. And he's like, do you have someone to take you to the hospital right now? And I said, my wife is out in the car. Can this wait? He's like, no. He's like, if you didn't have someone, I would call an ambulance for you. So my wife drove me to the hospital and I waited to see someone, to tell me what was going on with, my blood pressure. And this is what I mean about like the frustration about our medical system, right? They triaged me, and my blood pressure was 235 over 140.
Okay.
And then I sat in the waiting room for 4 hours before I saw someone. Doctor comes in. He's like, "Hey, listen, we need to get this. Obviously, need to get this treated as soon as possible." Spent a couple days in the hospital. So all that to say, I wonder, like the whole starting insulin thing, like really pushed my blood pressure to where it should not have been, or whether that was a side effect of Ozempic, or because I was eating everything that I should have, and my blood sugar was, my A1Cs were around like the lower sixes.
Did your blood pressure return without medication, or did it need to be medicated?
It needed to be medicated.
Let's go back for a second to talk about the retinopathy. So you started a GLP and then you had like a sudden improvement of your blood sugar, stabilization, lower blood sugars. So that could lead to something, I think they call it like early worsening of diabetic retinopathy. It happens like when the levels drop quickly after being elevated for a long time. And something about that abrupt improvement in glucose control can stress the blood vessels in the retina. And that can lead to like new, or I guess if you already had bleeding, increased bleeding, which is one of the reasons why they can't just blanket get GLPs, through the FDA for type 1s, because what about all those long-term type 1s who have had elevated blood sugars like you for a decade, right? And then suddenly we whip this on here. You see this significant improvement in your blood sugar control. And then, boom, you start seeing this problem with your retinopathy. So a rapid reduction in blood glucose can definitely temporarily worsen the condition, instead of like, you would think just like better is better, but it's not, like, because there's this time where your body's trying to adjust. Now, how could that impact your blood pressure? Did they tell you the GLP had something to do with the blood pressure? Or is that just your concern?
That was my concern. And I think the reason why I make that connection too is because I never, like, even with the most basic, like the starter dose, whatever that is for Ozempic, I just felt weird the whole entire time that I was on it, to the point where I told my endocrinologist, I was like, I can't do this thing anymore. Like, I would rather like keep the weight on rather than feel like I have just eaten Thanksgiving dinner every day. I have a theory that it's a combination between Ozempic and insulin itself.
Well, I can tell you this, that everything that I know about GLP and anything that I can pull up here in front of me while we're sitting here would say that the GLP is going to lower blood pressure, not push it up. I mean, you might have been upset while you were on it, or not like the way you felt and been stressed or something the whole time. And that's completely possible. But I don't think that functionally it would have made your blood pressure go up.
Okay.
So like nothing that I can see there.
Yeah.
I mean, again, I'm a guy with a podcast, so grain of salt and all. It doesn't make a ton of sense to me. So they put you on what? They gave you Ozempic, so 0.25 for 4 weeks.
Right.
Then at the 5th week, they put you to 0.5.
Yep.
And you felt very full all the time. Were you going to the bathroom on a regular schedule?
Yes.
You were. You were pooping. Okay.
Yep.
That full feeling. Did you ever even get past the part where it didn't even feel like the food was going down when you ate it? Like my food felt like it stopped in my chest at first. Does that description ring true with you, or you just felt very full in your stomach?
No, you're right. You're right. It was weird. It was like I had all the symptoms of acid reflux without it feeling like I was,
like it was burning. It wasn't burning. Yeah. No, yeah. It slows your digestion down pretty significantly.
Yeah.
If you keep did you eat through it? Meaning, like, did you take in the same bulk of food that you had prior?
Yeah. Yep.
That's why you felt like that.
Yeah.
For sure. Yeah. Did you lose any weight?
It was more than just a fullness, though. It was almost like it made me nauseous to the point where you were on the verge of being sick all the time. If that kind of makes sense. I did not like the experience.
No. I've heard that from people, but often those people then tell me that they didn't decrease their eating yet. So it's slowing down your digestion, but it hadn't impacted your hunger yet. Is that about what was going on, do you think?
Yeah.
So you can't, Well, that makes sense to me. Yeah. Was it helping your blood sugar?
No, it was not.
You didn't notice any different needs at all?
No, I was eating the same, and my endocrinologist was like, listen, just be patient, and eventually, we got to get these blood sugars down a little bit more. I kept on waiting for things to get better, and it just never happened.
Yeah. No, I don't think listen, again, I want to say, not a doctor, not advice, but I think if you would have eaten like physically less food, you might have felt better. And then maybe you could have stayed on it longer until it actually started impacting your hunger. And then maybe it would have like cascaded in a better way for you. But I mean, if you were having that much trouble with it, then, obviously, feeling better is the right thing. Have you found another way to lose the weight? You went low carb. Did that help?
Yes, that definitely helped. And that might be a good segue into like the
what I was thinking when I said it.
I got to the point where I was like, okay, well, insulin is the number one thing that will keep my blood sugar where it needs to be. I just need to, alter what I'm eating, like make different choices, and be a good diabetic.
Mm-hmm.
At the end of 2021, 2020, beginning of 2022, I started finding myself. So let me back up. I was on a sliding scale at the time when I first started with insulin. I was on a sliding scale of 5. And so like most meals, I would take maybe 8, 9, 10 units.
Mm.
At the end of 2021, I started noticing that I had to take a little bit more insulin than normal, which I know you talk about, like there's a honeymoon period with, insulin, and, you may need to use more after, a little while after your diagnosis. But I started noticing that like the insulin, it was like 8, 9, 10 units did not do anything.
Derek, it sounds to me like you were on like a decade-long slow drift into type 1 diabetes.
Yeah. Well,
so eventually your needs went up too because your beta cells probably stopped helping.
That's another point that we can get to as well. So pretty much over the course of the next year and a half, every time I saw my endocrinologist, she was like, okay, more insulin.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's bump it up. I had to switch endocrinologists because I had an issue with prescriptions not being filled by the office. Great endocrinologist, but the office just wasn't helping out. So I decided to switch to something that was closer to where I worked anyway.
Mm-hmm.
I saw a new endocrinologist and he's like, okay, let's just bump up the amount of insulin. And sometime in the middle of 2022, for meals, I was taking between 40 and 60 units of insulin.
Okay.
My body, I felt like, was shutting down. Like now, instead of being on one minimum dose for blood pressure, I had increased to the max dose for 4 different blood pressure medicines. I'm using between 40 and 60 units of insulin per meal. And I told my wife, I was like, I feel like my body's like giving up. Like I honestly, Scott, it was at the time where we were seriously thinking about putting a will together,
Mm-hmm. Really?
And I was like, okay, better get that done. I felt like I was in a slow motion train wreck. I got to the point where like it was difficult for me even to walk up the stairs in my house. all of my muscles hurt. Like I could not do anything. It was almost like the reverse was happening, where before I got diagnosed, I was tired all the time, except I didn't have the cloudy vision, but I was drinking a lot of water, like no medicine, even the insulin was working for me. It just felt like my body was giving up.
Mm-hmm.
So one Saturday morning, I'm sitting there in a chair, and admittedly, I'm in touch with my faith, and I prayed and I said, God, I need you to give me answers, because I feel like I'm dying. And I went to Google, did some research, and at the bottom of the very last article that I looked at, which was 10 reasons why your body may not be accepting insulin as well as it should, something like that. Number 10 on the list, 10 out of 10, was you may be struggling with sleep apnea.
Okay.
And I finally realized that this was something that I needed to look into, because my wife kept on waking me up while we were watching. We always watch murder mystery shows at night and investigations and stuff like that. She would look over at me from on the couch where I was asleep, but she would hear me stop breathing.
Okay.
And would have to shake me to wake me up, because apparently, my body just wasn't breathing properly because of, whatever was going on. And I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
So I reached out to my endocrinologist and I said, hey, what do you think about a sleep study? And he said, oh yeah, that's a great idea. So had that done.
I'm sorry, I'm laughing because I'm it's so funny. They never have any advice, but then when you say something like, oh my God, it's a great idea. And then later you'd say, I learned this on Google, and they'd go, don't Google stuff. Well, you're not having any ideas, but okay. And every time I bring you something from Google, you say it's okay, as long as I don't say it's from Google, but go ahead.
This same guy told me to stay away from Google too, as well. So, but he's a good doctor, but yes, he's actually said those same words.
Oh, I know how it goes. Good. That's fine. Yeah.
So he said, yeah, good idea. Get it done. I did an in-home sleep study and found that between 20 and 25 times per hour, I was not breathing.
Jesus. That's
and
scary, huh?
That scared me half to death. So
was your weight higher at that point, Derek?
I was probably around 260 pounds.
How tall are you? You're 9 feet tall, though, so it's okay, right?
Right, exactly.
No. How tall are you?
I am 5'10".
Yeah, you were heavy.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
To try to explain to a doctor that I really am eating what I should, and have this much of a weight increase, it's how can I get these doctors to believe me? But
can I ask you a question? Forget the kinds of food. Calorically, do you think you were eating more calories than you needed in a day? Because this is generally how it happens to people, right? They start using their insulin. They're using enough of it, but they're eating more calories than they should. The insulin, of course, is a storage hormone. And so it is properly packing away calories as, fat and other things. And then they gain weight and they say, I don't understand. I'm eating well, but they're eating even if they're eating well, they may be eating too much. Is that happening to you? Because you earlier said you think you were even on the Wegovy or on the Ozempic, you were still eating maybe more food than you should have for that scenario.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I think there's a point that you get to where no matter what you eat, as far as carbs, if you're eating tons of fat, at least for me, I can see a huge difference in low carb, low fat versus low carb, high fat.
Also, low carb is lower calories too.
Yeah. True. But, that all goes back to the quality of food that you eat too, and being mindful of that. But I don't know. I feel like I was trying to do everything that I should have been doing for the most part, but again, this is one piece of the puzzle that I needed that, I just happened to randomly come across. And it's like, okay.
I pulled this information together a couple different ways when you first got on. So sleep apnea can significantly impact blood sugar control in people with type 1 diabetes. The relationship between sleep apnea and blood sugar management is complex. Here's some of the ways, right? So stress hormone response, sleep apnea causes frequent pauses in breathing, which leads to a decrease in oxygen level. The body responds by releasing stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline to wake the person up to normalize the breathing. And then, of course, those hormones can trigger, a rise in your blood sugar.
Mm-hmm.
There's also impaired insulin sensitivity. The constant release of stress hormones due to sleep apnea can make it harder for the body to use insulin effectively, both in people with and without diabetes. For those with type 1, this can lead to unpredictable blood sugar levels and increased insulin requirements. Then there's increased risk of nocturnal hypoglycemia. People with type 1 diabetes who have sleep apnea may experience erratic blood sugar patterns at night, including nighttime lows. The body's response to these lows can be blunted due to poor sleep quality, making nighttime hypoglycemia harder to detect and address. This can lead to daytime fatigue and glucose variability because we know poor sleep caused by the sleep apnea can also impact your blood sugars. And then the last thing it says is that sleep apnea contributes to systematic inflammation, which exacerbates diabetes-related complications such as cardiovascular disease, and inflammation can also impair glucose metabolism, worsening glycemic control over time, and as you know, give your mom an aneurysm on top of everything else.
Yep.
So that's what I figured out about that an hour ago, and I've been waiting to read that. I feel like I did a good job. So you figure out about the sleep apnea.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to assume they put you on a CPAP machine, but don't they also want to get your weight down?
They do.
Okay.
They do.
Okay.
So, I have regular appointments with a sleep doctor. After starting CPAP therapy, I felt so much better. It was like, it was almost like being re-diagnosed with something again, like that feeling that I had after someone was like, hey, here's insulin. And then I started using it. It's like, wow. I just would encourage anyone, I know you probably have disclosures that you have to read, right? But like, I would encourage anybody, like if you suddenly see an increase in the amount of insulin or blood pressure medicine that you're using, you might want to take a look at a sleep study to see what's happening. The worst thing that could happen is they tell you, hey, you're sleeping well at night. So
yeah, right. Yeah, that's the worst news you could get, right? Or but listen, when I don't sleep at night, when I stop breathing at night, it's because I think Kelly's holding a pillow over my face. But but every time I wake up, she pretends to be asleep, so I can't really catch her.
Yeah, right.
Well, I'm glad that helped you. It really did. So, in the end, your fix was you tried a bunch of different things, right? And what ended up working for you was lower carb intake and the sleep apnea machine to help you with this while you're losing the weight. Is there a feeling that you won't need the CPAP machine at a certain weight, or what do they think about that?
Let me take you like a little bit forward.
Mm-hmm.
Even though the CPAP thing had increased my quality of sleep and I was on insulin, my A1C still was not where it needed to be. It was still hanging around in like the 6 or 7s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I had a conversation with my endocrinologist recently, and I said to him, I've had doctors tell me that I'm a type 2 and a type 1, but they've never gone over the specific tests that tells me like what's going on with my body. Okay. Can we please like run those tests? And so we ran a battery of tests in June of this year. And it came back that I was re-diagnosed as a type 2 in June of this year.
Wait, what?
Yep.
It says they did what, like a C-peptide, or what did they do?
Yep. A C-peptide and a whole bunch of other things that I can't remember, but I am slightly on the type 2 side of things, apparently with the C-peptide tests and everything else that they said, that they saw. So my doctor put me on at the beginning of June, put me on Mounjaro.
Okay. And you're dealing with that better than you did with the Ozempic?
Well, yeah, no side effects whatsoever.
Good for you.
when I feel full, it doesn't come with like a nauseous feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And I had an A1C go from 8.7 at the beginning of June to 5.6 a couple weeks ago.
So wait, so did you have a C-peptide test that showed like high C-peptide levels?
Yes.
Due to insulin resistance is kind of what they think of there. And how about, did you do any auto antibody testing?
I don't think so.
Okay. So are you comfortable that you have type 2 diabetes?
I'm good with it.
That's the funniest thing anyone's going to say to me this week. It sucks though, isn't it? Like that, like you were told type 2, then the doctor, I mean, I remember back in the story, the doctor very confidently came in and said, no, you have type 1. And then here's some insulin and you think, oh, that helped. So I probably have type 1. Oh, wow. I hate these stories. Listen, people tell them to me all the time, but I mean, you could definitely ask for auto antibody testing, right? To see if you have, I mean, I can go over them with you if you want, but like it's, there's like, I think the most common one would be the GAD antibody test. An elevated level there would, I think, shows that there's an autoimmune response. I mean, your mom has an autoimmune issue, which is, makes it something worth looking into, I would imagine.
Yeah.
There's insulin autoantibodies, isolate cell. What is that? ICA test. It looks at the insulin producing cells in the pancreas. A couple more. I could look them up. And there's a newer one, zinc transporter, something. But I mean, but are you taking insulin right now?
At my last appointment, my doctor said to me, let's keep the long acting and get rid of the short acting insulin, because I was having lows all the time about a week before that appointment. And he said, let's just get rid of it and see what happens. And numbers were kind of good for about a week.
Right.
Then about a week and a half after that, I had to start using insulin with meals. So generally between 3 and 5 units total at most is what I use for meals now.
Yeah. So I would, like, if I was you, I would want the antibody testing.
Okay.
Because I would want to know for certain if I have type 1 or not. Probably an incredible thing if you were in a 15-year LADA situation. But at the same time, like, if that was your situation, you don't want to wake up one day and just realize that you're not getting insulin that you need and, you're in DK or have bigger problems than that.
Right.
So, I mean, I would want to at least know what I'm on the lookout for. Now, I imagine you're wearing a CGM.
I am. Yeah.
Okay. So you're seeing your blood sugar. So that of course is, kind of helps head that problem off at the pass a little bit. But I don't know, man. Like, I would want somebody to tell me for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's me. I've also had people on here who tell similar stories about Mounjaro specifically. I mean, did you hear the one guy, 50 years old, diagnosed type 1, 6 years on insulin? They put him on Mounjaro for weight, loses a bunch of weight, completely off insulin. His blood sugar still acts wonky, like he has excursions at meals, but it comes back down on its own. He expects that he's going to have to use insulin again at some point, but at the moment isn't even using any.
Yeah, I heard that episode and I was like, wow.
That feels like you a little bit.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, like I've lost almost 25 pounds since the beginning of June.
Oh, good for you.
My world is completely different now. I look back at like everything that happened, like going from using 40 to 60 units of insulin per meal to now only having to maybe use 3 to 5 units is like, wake me up from this dream.
Yeah, it's bonkers. But there's going to be more stories like yours.
Yeah.
With this Mounjaro, I believe, like moving forward. And I hope that I guess not doctors, but researchers. I hope that researchers dig through it and try to make more sense of it than just leaving a person like you or the guy we were talking about before, just going like, well, it's working. So I'd like you to all know exactly what's happening. And hopefully that will be what happens in the future. But for now, I'm happy that you're better off. I'll tell you this. I've lost 50 pounds and I'm 5'9". So today I think I'm 185 or something like that. I think that's my weight today. And so I started this whole thing at like 236. I'm going to tell you, I am not too thin. I am not like, I haven't gotten lost in like losing weight or anything like that. I'm just talking about like health wise and, you know, what my body looks like, you know, meaning where is it holding fat and stuff like that. At 185, I still have weight to lose. I don't have weight to lose like people think anymore, but there's still fat on my body that just is not healthy for me.
Yeah.
And so I maybe I should say I have fat to lose. I know the 25 pounds is awesome, and it definitely is, but wait till you lose 25 more and you look back on this day and you think, oh God, I was so happy when I just lost the first 25.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing too, Scott, that is weird is with CPAP therapy, I got the number of times where I'm trying to think of, I'm at a loss for what the exact term is, but the number of events per hour, basically, where you stop breathing with sleep apnea, that went down all the way to 5.
Okay.
Generally about 5 with CPAP therapy. But since I've been on Mounjaro, on average, every night is between 1 and 2 times per hour. So I feel like
since you lost weight or since you shot it?
Since Mounjaro.
That's crazy.
The other thing that I have in the back of my mind too is like, let's say I have all these tests done that definitively confirm that I'm either a type 1 or a type 2. If they come back and say, well, you're a type 1, I would hate for my insurance company to say, okay, can't be on Mounjaro anymore, because my mom actually tried to go on Mounjaro as well.
But she's a type 1 and they told her no.
They told her no. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. I see your fear there. Oh, that makes sense too. I'm trying to figure out how a GLP could help beyond weight loss with sleep apnea. Systematic inflammation. So sleep apnea is associated with systematic inflammation. Maybe that's where
it could be. Yeah.
Interesting. I can't wait to find out. Even just your neck getting, like losing weight in your neck would definitely help with sleep apnea as well.
Yeah. Yep.
Crazy. Yeah, you don't realize where fat is until somebody starts talking to you about like, oh, that fat's under your muscle. And you're like, what?
Yep.
You mean down by my organs?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oopsie. Yeah. Oh, wow, man. Dave, you've had a wild ride. Does this pen past either? You said you had 2 boys, right? Do your boys have any autoimmune issues?
No, other than my oldest has allergy-induced asthma, but like other than that, they're perfectly healthy. So
I'm glad. Well, this is the part where I ask you if there's anything we haven't spoken about that we should have, because this was great. I appreciate you just kind of unfurling the story for me like this. It was awesome. Thank you. What, did we miss anything?
The last thing that I think is worthwhile is that especially for someone who is newly diagnosed, I think one of the things that I did not realize at the beginning of my diabetic journey is that you have to make sure that you're in a right place with how you are emotionally, because this is a disease that can carry a lot of weight. So make sure that you are well and that you watch, how you are reacting to certain things, like get around people who will support you and will help you, because it's more than just taking medicine in a lot of cases. Like I have a great family. I have a good support system. I have good friends that will ask me how I'm doing and offer help and support. And that's important. I just think that you can't ignore the weight of what type 2 or type 1 is and just say, well, that doesn't really matter. You have to address that, as much as you address, taking medicine as well.
Yeah. No, I mean, the support piece is huge, and having people around you that can support you is great. If you don't have that, reaching out into community to find people can be very helpful. Therapy, if you can't find that, but I think you're right. There's a weight that comes with it, and you can't ignore it, because one day it'll just knock you over.
Yep.
Yeah. No, I appreciate you saying that very much. Thank you. Thank you very much. Derek, I appreciate you doing this whole thing. We didn't even get to talk about all the some of the cool jobs you've had. But maybe another time.
Yep.
All right. Hold on one second for me. This was great. Thank you.
Sure.
Sarah's story so genuinely encapsulates the experiences that so many caregivers go through on a daily basis. Our Juicebox community knows the importance of caregiver support so intimately, and Sarah's story is just a great example of what caregivers go through on a daily basis. To learn more about the Medtronic Champion community and to find helpful resources and tips for caregivers and families, visit medtronicdiabetes.com/parents-caregivers. Did you know if just one person in your family has type 1 diabetes, you're up to 15 times more likely to get it too? So screen it like you mean it. One blood test can spot type 1 diabetes early. Tap now, talk to a doctor, or visit screenedfortype1.com for more info. The Diabetes Variables series from the Juicebox Podcast goes over all the little things that affect your diabetes that you might not think about. From travel and exercise to hydration and even trampolines. Juiceboxpodcast.com. Go up in the menu and click on Diabetes Variables. The Juicebox Podcast is full of so many series that you want and need. After Dark, Ask Scott and Jenny, Algorithm Pumping, Bold Beginnings, Defining Diabetes, Defining Thyroid, the Diabetes Pro Tip series for Type 1, the Diabetes Variables series, Mental Wellness, Type 2 Diabetes Pro Tip, How We Eat. Oh my goodness, there's so much at juiceboxpodcast.com. Head up into that menu and pick around. And if you're in the private Facebook group, just go to the feature tab for lists upon lists of all of the series. Always free, always helpful. Subscribing to the Juicebox Podcast newsletter is this easy. You type juiceboxpodcast.com into a browser, scroll to the bottom, put in your email address, click sign up. Hey, thanks for listening all the way to the end. I really appreciate your loyalty and listenership. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back very soon with another episode of the Juicebox Podcast. Hey, what's up, everybody? If you've noticed that the podcast sounds better and you're thinking like, how does that happen? What you're hearing is Rob at Wrong Way Recording doing his magic to these files. So if you want him to do his magic to you, wrongwayrecording.com. You got a podcast? You want somebody to edit it? You want Rob.